close my closet door.
Oh,
Oh, hello.
cheers. Cheers, Chris.
Closing my closet door. Cheers.
No, Chris. I feel like we're used to, I'm not sure. I feel like we've seen the closet door open before, but the internet might want to know what's inside.
I'm sure you have. I sometimes, like in my Zoom workshop, I'll be sitting here and the people will say, "Oh, I like that shirt there, Chris. Right, that stripe on the back."
And then you're like, "Oh, well, I'm embarrassed. I'm nervous here."
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Oops.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
Well,
here we are.
anyhow, here we are. January 15th, mid-January. It's crazy. I can't believe we're already this far into the new year.
Neither.
For those that are concerned about Mercury retrograde, it will be ending in a few days. So I am not an astrologer, but I am aware of that. So if anybody has any other astrology knowledge, horoscope information they can provide to us in the chat, we would love that insight. That'd be great.
How often does that happen? How often? Because it seems like Mercury is always in retrograde and things are always going wrong. And people are always saying, "Well, that's because Mercury's in retrograde." It's like all the time.
I know. I actually do not know personally, but it happens a few times a year.
Why not?
I know. And it can be difficult to make plans. Like stuff from the past comes back to get you. I mean, maybe in good ways, but maybe in scary ways if you've been kind of a naughty person. I feel like the Andrew Tate moment was kind of one of those, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an astrologer.
Well, listen, moms out there, mom and dad. Hi, mom and dad.
Hey, mom and dad. Got Mary Cathryn Harper out there. Good to see you.
We were talking about that name, Mary Cathryn.
That's right.
Also, my sister's name is Mary Cathryn, but with a K. With a K. And we call her Mary Kay.
Listen, we got a lot of Cathryns in the house. We got Mom Cathryn in the audience. We've got Mary Cathryn. We've got Katie Cathryn Schneider. And we've got our special guest this evening, Cathryn Essinger. We need to get more Cathryns. Call up everyone. Fill the chat with Cathryn.
Let's do it.
Oh my goodness. So Chris, I know you were closing your closet door, but you also did not have a beer to open today because you are drinking I
got a margarita here.
A margarita.
Yes, margarita from a Costco special. Margarita.
Yeah.
Which I highly recommend. But yeah, I ran out of beer. Well, it does happen. But
it does,
and I kind of let it happen. I was like, should I go out and get some more beers? And I was like, yeah. If I buy a bunch of beers, I'll just drink them. It's like buying a bag of chips. It's like if there's chips there, I will eat the chips. So I try not to put chips.
Same. But, yes.
Yeah. So it's that kind of thing. So I said, well, I do have margarita.
Nice.
Stuff there. So, we'll mix it up. It's a new year.
It is a new year. It is a new year. I had a lovely margarita flight last night at this fantastic Mexican restaurant that I went to with two of my friends who were sort of like impromptu. We were able to get together. It was so nice.
Yeah. Where'd you go?
Yeah. What's that?
Where'd you go?
Oh, Everito's here in South Norwalk. Very fun, very lovely place. Very nice margaritas. And they put like a pretty good amount of serranos on top of their guacamole. And so you got to watch out. You got to watch out if you're not ready for the fresh serrano slices, serrano peppers.
Holy cow.
Yeah. But my friend was like, oh, yeah, I like spicy peppers. And I think he was thinking of like jalapeno level spice. All I can say is
Yeah.
that the last time Serranos are much spicier. But I don't know, maybe our guest this evening, Hamant Singh, can tell us a little bit more about some of the spicy things he's enjoyed since moving to Mexico, where he currently resides. But anyways, it's time for us to officially welcome you to FUMFA 117. We are so excited to be back and to be welcoming tonight's special guests. Two special guest poets are with us, Cathryn Essinger and Hamant Singh. It's going to be a very cool evening of all poetry. Chris, you're surrounded by poets.
I know. It's disorienting, but it's okay. It's okay. I have a good feeling about tonight. It's going to be some great stuff. So,
Yeah.
so I'm cool.
You're holding on over there.
My best friends are poets. I'm fine with that.
That's right, Chris. Sitting right here. That's so funny. Well, actually, at our upcoming in our February in-person open mic night, we've got 3 prose features in February for our in-person. I was just thinking about that. That's going to be a prose-tastic night. Yeah. But
it
Chris,
absolutely is.
Yeah, tell the audience what we've got coming up next week and in these next few weeks.
Yes, right. Well, speaking of in-person open mics, this coming Friday, the 20th of January, we have our in-person open mic at Eco Evolution in South Norwalk, our favorite place in the world to do these things. And we've got a spectacular lineup, including our featured guests. Luke Molina and Liz Reichland are going to both play some tunes. And then we have Suzanne Frischkorn is going to do some poetry. And then we got a whole bunch of people. We got a whole bunch of people signed up. A lot of music and also some great writing. So it's going to be very cool. And that's Friday, the 20th, 7 p.m. Right? That's our new start time.
7 p.m. people, not 7:30.
135 Washington Street in South Norwalk. And the next week we're back on the air. We're back on the 29th, and we have David Radovich, and we also have from FUMFA, current FUMFA student, Jane Van Voren Rogers, and they were both here last week for our open mic. And then the week after that, on the 5th of February, I feel like we need a drum roll or something. We need some spectacular noises and like fireworks.
What about these background sounds that I've just found back here?
There you go. Do some of that. We get our friends Philip J. Curtis, aka Midnight, and John Smith. They're going to be here. Chance's book, I believe it's out. Last time I checked, last week, it said it hadn't quite come out yet, even though the date said it had. But I think it might be out now. And then Midnight's book, maybe by then it's coming out. I don't know.
Yes. John Chance's book is out, and it was listed. Oh my God! Hold on a minute. I posted it. I posted it to our page yesterday. Listed as #1 new release in Caribbean and Latin American poetry on Amazon. Holy moly. So please go support our friend John Chance Acevedo. We are so excited for him. And Midnight's book is coming out February 1st. That is a significant night for him. And I'll let him share that with you when he is on the show. So we are so excited to have them celebrate their books. There are, really good friends of ours. It's going to be a super awesome night. And I'm sure they've got some surprises planned for us. They always do.
Oh yeah. It's going to be a good one.
It's going to be great. Well, we know that we have folks joining us live tonight on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And we know that some people will be watching later on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, being in different time zones and such. So we're so excited to welcome you to our stream. And Chris, it is time for us to welcome our first reader of the evening, Hamant Singh. Hey, Hamant.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi there. Yep.
hey.
Just unmute myself. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to have you, Hamant. I am so excited for you, for your book. Some of you may know I work with Hamant, and we've shared some poetry back and forth, and I'm super excited about his awesome brand new book, The Sybil. And without further ado, let me share his bio with you. Hamant Singh is a Singaporean writer who is influenced by horror, different cultures, and the occult. In 2022, he completed his first collection of poems entitled The Sybil. 70 Demons and Inseparable have since been published in the July 2021 edition of Illumin, a quarterly digest for science fiction fantasy poetry. Inseparable was also nominated for the prestigious 2022 Riesling Award by the Science Fiction Poetry Association. That's awesome. He currently resides in the mountains of Chiapas, Mexico, where he enjoys gardening, reading, and making music. And he is currently working on a second book featuring more international writers. Take it away, Hamant.
Cheers. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm Hamant. I just had my book The Sybil released last month, so this is fairly new. It's a collection split into 3 sections. So it's progressive. So it begins with conception. The first section is called conception, and then the middle bit is the festering, and then chaos right at the end. Yeah, so this is a work in progress that's been spanning something like 9 years, and I finally got it out, so I'm quite happy that's finally out on shelves everywhere, online as well, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and stuff. So um, I'm gonna tour the book in May, so I'm planning this upcoming tour of Mexico and the US in May. So I'm looking forward to that as well. It's gonna be like a month long, so really long tour. I'm gonna read you some poems from each section, and hope you enjoy it. So this first poem is called Inseparable, and this was the one that was nominated for the Riesling. Didn't win though, but I still like this poem very much. It's about an imagined situation where uh, twins are born, but one survives and the other doesn't. Inseparable. You were my better half, and I yours. For months we grew together, 20 little fingers and 20 tiny toes. Our heartbeats turned to mother's metronome until someone forgot to wind your clock. We were inseparable, not literally, thankfully. I'd hate to have to drag your remnants around with me for the rest of my life. But I think I already do. I first saw you in mirrors and then everywhere else. In my classroom, sat right next to me, obviously, inseparable. Then I stopped seeing you. I felt you. Your wicked ghost never let me go. A cursed shadow that went everywhere I did. Everyone laughed at me. A crazy person with the imaginary friend. No less at 10. All my dates, a menage a trois. She was the third wheel and didn't even know it. You were a little secret, ours. No one could even begin to fathom the bond that we share. A link, stronger than any oath or vow. Shackles on my shoulder, fetters on my feet. You will never leave, even though you did. Nor do I want you disconnected, even though you are. You are my better half, and I yours. We will always be. So that's from the first section of the text. I'm going to read another poem from the same section, from the first section, inspired by a moth. This was during the pandemic, and every night this moth would come in through the window, the same moth, and then leave. This one's called The Spectre. It came from beyond and sailed through an open window, past my distracted gaze, into my world, past my oblivious haze, parading death in its trail of brown, bumping into everything as if alien to this world. Finding bearings seemed to be a most trying task, until at last it rested next to me. Startled at first, but I saw it meant no harm. It was lost and drifted around till it found the one it was searching for. Who might you be, or might have been? Why have you come? Are you to sit next to me, to follow me around like a shadow? At times it did breathe in my ear as it roamed unstable, like a drunk man or a meandering river, unintelligible, Enochian whispers, melodies of maladies, dirges of the dead. My nightly companion, till I grew grey and frail, my touch like its wings, crumbling. With every slight movement, my eyesight like small cracks in rocks. I stopped hearing your tales as sound slowly became a stranger to me. You, spectre, were there all along, hovering over me, a shadow that grew forceful as I turned frail. I don't see you anymore, as lonely as I am. I have learned to sail as you do over vast oceans through open windows, parading death with my trail of brown. So that was one of my favorites in the book as well. I'm going to read you something from the second section of the book, The Festering, which focuses more on things that have happened in my life or events that have happened in my life. For some reason, I've been lied to a lot in my life. So this poem, it's the first one in the section, and this one's called On Lying. You lie about where you lie and who you lie with, to him with whom you lie. Where lying becomes commonplace, everywhere you lie, every day you lie, everyday lies, and you continue to lie and lie and lie and lie and lie. They become nameless, your lies. When I first realized your lies, I wanted to lie and told myself it was just me, overthinking, overanalyzing, and wondering too much. But that is the premise of a lie, wonder. A lie is born out of wonder, born out of fantasy, and then you lie and lie and lie and lie. Then you wake from a dream and the fantasy comes to an end, only to find the verity that lies next to you, verily. The truth is your bedfellow with whom you lie with and whom you lie to. The truth lies next to you. And then you lie and lie until you lie next to truth and lie no more. This is another poem from the same section of the book. This is slightly closer to the end of that section. But when I was growing up in Singapore, we've always had geckos in our kitchen, and they always used to hide in places. And there was this one gecko called Uncle Joe. It was this big gray thing that would always you'd always see him. Uh, but he would hide when he saw you, but you would just catch glimpses of him. Um, this is about a time I stepped into a kitchen and I stepped right into a gecko. I was in a state of shock. I went back to my room and I wrote this entire poem in one sitting, which is a feat I've never been able to do again. But this one's called Reptile. And there I caught you, squiggling around between my toes, for I let you in that darkened room, scrambling for your life, your honor. I find the defendant guilty. I couldn't see much, but I knew it was you, as much as I knew it all my life. History repeating itself, just as it was when I was younger. Cold and rubbery, like an eraser between your teeth. Some things don't change. Opportunism, when the cats are away. I trusted you to stay away, but you just couldn't resist, could you? Uncle Joe owned the plot, but he knew limits. He'd stay away and make his break once the coast was clear. The coast was clear enough, wasn't it? The boast was near enough, wasn't it? But you, shameless, out in the brazen open, whilst you knew my fears, no remorse, no regard for what I'd felt, even though Uncle Joe had already spoken of it. What would people say? What would they laugh of? The coward? The cuckold? I put the lights on and reached for my wine, sweet reprieve, because I didn't want you to be another, not you, after all these years, and yet I know what I felt between my toes. Yes, the drink was ignorance, maybe the goal, sorry. I just wanted you at bay. I knew you were out to play, but you had to mock me in the process, leave me humiliated. And yet, here I am, full glass of ignorance. Yeah. So I'm going to move to the third section of the book. Here. This poem is called Her. I think this might be my favorite poem of the whole collection. Enjoy. Her ravishing roar silenced by her whispering ebb. A repetitious humdrum that was far from the mundane. A piercing pulchritude that mocked time. I am swollen with deafening infinity. The radiant sun spares no one. As she scattered her rays, the sparkles danced off waves. Ain lay before me, and it was everything. Powerless to shift my stare, while the glistening gripped my soul. The salty scent that fills my being, the burn of the sting from the salt, intoxicating. She had not touched me, but she had, and left me drunk, as my empty shell washed ashore. Inebriated, dizzy, ecstatic where I lay. Nor did I want to be elsewhere, for what more would I need to seek? The terrific, the terrifying, her majesty, her magnificence. Her wrath churned the waters. I stood, rooted, awestruck, as her advances threatened on the horizon. Take me, I am yours to devour. The waves rise and tower above me. I am helplessly consumed by the immense, as I am willingly swallowed by her. That was Her from the last section of the book, Chaos. And this one is also from the last section of the book. This is one about death. This is called Para allá vamos todos. It's in Spanish, something along the lines of that place where we all go to. That grey, cold corner, I remember. That immense, dusty desert. I was there, but unseen, and now I am going home. But I am not. That final voyage over the timeless ocean. I heard a whisper, Ya es hora, and I knew I had to leave, like family calling you home when day sinks into darkness. Ese lugar, para allá vamos todos. That starless, decrepit chamber of pitch. I journey down into the abyss, descending lower into cavernous infinity. Escucha la oscuridad y el viento sin viento. The great viper carries me on his back as we meander through eternal catacombs, each more dank than the last. Soundless echoes of the devil fade into voices of the old ones. One orchestra, one symphony. That cold grey corner is a place of rest, where wandering shadows blend into one another. Shells, husks, meditating in the cold, floating forever between the icy rings of Saturn. And there I shall lay, entombed, engraved. Yep. Just gonna do one more poem. I think I might have time for two more actually, but
Go for it, Haven!
So this one is from the middle bit as well. It's called My Surrender. In total surrender, I sit before the ocean. I do not fear the beyond. It swallows my soul as it destroys everything else. Petty human emotions engulfed by the black light. In total surrender, the sun seeds itself. Its rays burned black as it fades into Ayin. Sun kills the sun, and Yami is nowhere. A reset to infinity, to chaos, for chaos is all when there is naught. In total surrender, all life gives in to death. She rises once more, a storm of horns and wings, to claim what she once bore, the mother reclaiming her spawn. Everything is one with fire, everything is none with light. To open ourselves and receive darkness, it swallows my soul as it destroys everything else. Time stops moving, tides stop flowing, as he hungrily devours our souls, unveiling the only light worth seeing. There is no eye, and vision is restored. Everything is now clear on the pathless path. I think I can squeeze in one more reading. This one's she is gay. Uh, this one's a bit special because it's a lot of it is based off Hindu mythology. Um, it's called Mahapralaya, which is the great dissolve, the great dissolution of everything, of time. Um, Hindus measure time very differently, and one of the greatest measure of time is called a kalpa. And a kalpa is about 4 billion years old, give or take. And a mahapralaya is the end of kalpas in general. So this one's called mahapralaya. Yeah. Thwarted back into the great breath, one pralaya to negate it all, the cessation of Sweta Baraha, an end and the start of endlessness, annihilation of the cosmos, a soon to be forgotten melody in time. And what of the blood? What blood? What ties? All is reduced to one in fire. The amassed wealth and the braggery, riches and opulence, material made immaterial before the great dissolve. The end of ego and the death of I, as we cross over to the great beyond after we have been purified. Yama smiles and is ready for us, 1,000 nooses for the end, while his father burns himself out and shines no more. A pathless path of Widdershins, Mahakala, the greatest of levelers, the beginning and the end. A single consciousness filtered into the bliss of Mahaparinibbana, bathed in pitch, illuminated by the black flame, the true essence beyond existence. How immaculate the nakedness of all, stripped bare, barrenness, mere husks and shells that will gather to form the new all. Ayin. It will be time for the forgotten ones to rise. Hail Tiamat, Mother Divine, rise Kalia, for you are cleansed of humiliation. Your children are gathered, for it is time. The end to all kalpas. Thank you.
Wow! Hamant Singh! Oh my God! Intense! Hamant, I just need to know how often do you get to read your poems live?
This is actually my first reading live, and I'm doing an online launch next Thursday, I think.
Oh my God! You would never know, Hamant, because I was totally captivated, right, Chris? Like, were you not like just leaning into your voice? You clearly know your poems so well, and are really sharing them and leaning into these words and phrases and kind of just stilling the whole moment around you. Just a fantastic reading and such a great, opportunity to get to see these wonderful like vignettes into these different sections. Each poem really, really powerful, incredible images, really sort of like eerily and captivatingly divine and spiritual and mythic images. Just such cool stuff.
Thank you very much. Glad you like it.
Oh yeah, I mean, geez, these your ambition is I mean, these aren't poems. I mean, yes, you have
cosmic.
You have a moth and a gecko, but it, which people can relate to, but it's just like, yeah, cosmic. I mean, it's like boom, we zoom back and we're getting everything, from the myth.
4 billion years.
Right, 4 billion years. I mean, you're incredibly. The scope is incredible. So
It
fantastic.
is.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Glad you guys enjoyed it.
That is really, really awesome. And Hamant, I was freaking out about a little mouse that was in my apartment, and I don't know how I would do with geckos.
Oh, geckos are so cute, though. Come on, they're cool.
They
They
seem
are, but I'm just absolutely terrified of them is the problem. And then when they get really into intimate spots between your toes, and then
Well, that's yeah, that's weird. That's definitely weird.
yeah, but I love that, from the gecko and the moth, right, to visions of all these deities, and just the cadence of your reading voice as well. We're sort of like really enraptured by that. Just a really beautiful reading, and should get everyone excited to read that book. And when is your launch? Where can people find this? Do they need to like get online tickets?
No, the launch is free to attend. I'll be giving out a couple of books as well. It's on the 19th,
19th?
the same time as this show, actually, 8 p.m. ET. If you can look me up on Facebook, links and everything are there. I'm on Instagram at Hamant Singh 218, or on Facebook at Facebook.com/Hamant 218.
Fantastic. So Thursday, January 19th
That's
at
correct. Yeah.
8 p.m. ET. Okay, that's good. So it's not the same time as any of our events, so I'll definitely be there.
Looking forward to
Awesome,
seeing
Hamant.
you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we are excited to ask you lots of questions in the Q&A. So everybody
I'll be
save up your
sticking
questions for
with
Hamant.
And
All right.
so,
Thanks, Hamant.
yeah, we need to put that info in the chat too. So
In the chat. We absolutely do. Whoa, what a reading. And you're absolutely right, Chris. Just the way you put that, the scope from the gecko in the kitchen to like Judgment Day. That idea of 4 billion years. Oh my God. So fascinating. But anyways, Chris, what an incredible way to kick off the evening. And we're very excited about our second special guest poet. We're going to get to really just dwell in awesome poetry this evening. Super excited to welcome Cathryn Essinger. Hey, Cathryn.
Hey.
Hey.
Cathryn, Chris, ask that question.
I'm going to ask the question, is it hard G or soft G?
Essinger. I've been saying gur.
We say Essinger.
Okay.
Do as you please.
You were right. But it's I've heard with similar sounding names, different versions. So then it's so funny because we were talking about your first name, and then it never occurred to me. It's like, oh crap, I gotta ask.
That's so funny. Anyways, Cathryn, how are you doing this evening?
Pretty good. That was a wonderful reading. I'm awfully glad to hear those poems. Yeah. Those were wonderful.
Oh, yeah, same. I'm still like just reveling in these images and these different moments, and also just the sound of his voice and how he really paced himself out too. Like that was so cool. Anyways, Chris, would you do the honor of sharing Cathryn's bio with us?
Of course I will. Cathryn Essinger is the author of 5 books of poetry, and her 4th book, The Apricot and the Moon, and this we can discuss this. Is it apricot or apricot? The Apricot and the Moon was published in 2020 from Dos Madres Press. She has also published a chapbook titled Wings about raising monarch butterflies.
Awesome.
Her poems have appeared in a wide variety of journals, including Poetry, the Southern Review, the New England Review, Terrain, Calyx, Pank, and Midwest Gothic. These poems have been nominated for Pushcarts and Best of the Net, featured on the Writer's Almanac, and reprinted in American Life and Poetry. Cathryn lives in Troy, Ohio, where she raises monarch butterflies, which I think we have to talk about later.
Definitely.
Take it away,
well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to read some poems tonight from each of my books, because I realized when I was getting ready for this that I hardly ever get to read the poems that I really like. You're always focusing on what you've published last. So I'm going to start this evening by reading the title poem from A Desk in the Elephant House. I didn't realize when I published this poem how prophetic it would be for probably the rest of my writing. A Desk in the Elephant House. Sometimes something huge sits down beside you, and it is so large, so familiar, that even though you feel its breath upon your cheek, you are unaware of its presence. I have lived so long with the elephants that I can no longer tell you when they come and when they go. Their huge bodies fill the room, and yet they move so quietly, are so light on their wonderful feet, that they may as well be ghosts. When I put my face against their flanks, I am no more aware of them than the lover who turns in his sleep. At the desk, I keep the trivia of memory: how much grain eaten, how many pounds gained and lost. But memory is no more selective than the light that falls in broken slats across the floor, or the dust that lingers in the halls. How to define their absence except as the sadness that they leave in their wake? They are the stillness in an empty room, the touch too familiar to be known. And I wrote that poem after going to the Toledo Zoo, and where their old-fashioned elephant cages, they have a desk that sits between all of the cages where the elephants, where they keep track of the elephants and their lives. And the next poem I'm going to read is called The Philosophy Professor Discusses the Nature of the Self-Conscious Mind, or The Invisible Bear. I visited a colleague's class. He was teaching philosophy, and I had never taken a philosophy class before. And I came in, and the only seat available was in the front row, and I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful presentation. But at the break in the class period, I turned around and saw that most of the students behind me were sound asleep. And I thought, how can they ignore this? It seems so wonderful. Well, this is The Invisible Bear. Please do not think about bears, he says. And try as I might, here he comes, big and white, loose-jointed, lumbering over the ice floe of the page. And please do not consider your social security number and how you are dressed at the moment. And those things, too, came to rest beside the bear, who is now sprawled casually in the middle of the floor, like a family pet, becoming more and more familiar in all of the places that he should not be. So I put on my coat to cover the clothes that I am not wearing, and add my phone number to the list of trivia that I am supposed to suppress, and try not to remember the biologist who once explained how an invisible object, like a polar bear, can appear white. And suddenly I am snowblind in Ohio. Now the bear tilts his head confidently, as if he knows the answer to some question. And now he has forgotten the answer and is content to snuzzle between the pads of one fat paw. Already I can smell the pungency of wet fur, can feel his cold nose in my ear, and I know for a fact that Kant, Kierkegaard, and Sartre all owned bears, big, fat, slumbering creatures whose paws twitched in their sleep as they contemplated essence versus existence among polar seals. And in my mind, I have already accepted him as a plush reality, have already bought him a bed, checked his teeth, paid the vet. All that is left is to name him. I'm going to read a poem that's about my writers group. I have been in a writers group that has been meeting for 35 years. We know each other very well. We originated as 6 women, and we now have a man in our group, David Garrison. But the title of the poem is For 6 Friends. And you can imagine, women who have been together that long have discussed everything. For 6 friends. When I come back to haunt you, I promise it will be a gentle haunting. No bloody crosses on the wall to frighten you into the arms of religion. No unearthly moans or thunder to keep you awake. No need to carry talisman in your pockets. I won't have you trembling before cellar doors or avoiding moonlit nights. But when November comes to pick the lock between the living and the dead, notice, please, the door that whinnies on its hinge, the book that turns its own pages, the moth that hovers beside your chin. Talk to me when the cat stares at some nothingness beyond, when daylight fades and leaves move against the wind, and when women gather beside the fire to weave the truth and lies that make them friends. Set the table with Haviland and old silver and pull up an extra chair. And I write a lot about animals. I sometimes personify them, which poets tell me I'm not supposed to do, but that's another reason to do it, I suppose. I'm going to read a few poems from My Dog Does Not Read Plato. And I'll read the title poem, which is actually the allegory of the mirror, or My Dog Does Not Read Plato. I leaned a mirror against the wall, and for 2 weeks, we had twice as many cats and dogs, knees and feet. The cat, adept at avoiding controversy, slipped between the wall and the mirror's frame, reducing her worries by half. But the dog, too big for such an out-of-body experience, simply hurried past, tail low, ears flattened, no epiphanies for her, no moments of self-awareness, no desire to see herself as another. She does not fret over her mother's eyebrows, her father's sturdy snout, or regret last night's stolen pork chops or the bowl she licked too clean. She has never been nagged by doubt or trusted shadows on the wall of the cave. By the time I hang the mirror, I have almost forgotten what I wanted to see. Reason tells me that the mirror is true, but where is the proof of the mirror's reply? Who can step beyond to check the mechanism and its validity? All my dog knows is that the mirror lies, and I have no reason to think otherwise. She was a fun dog. And I'm also going to read a poem that personifies dogs, I suppose. A very well-known poet told me one time, don't ever personify animals, it will make you look like Walt Disney. And I immediately went out and did it. The man next door is teaching his dog to drive. This poem has been anthologized a lot, and I always know when it has come out again somewhere because people send me pictures of their dog sitting behind the steering wheel. The man next door is teaching his dog to drive. It all began when he came out one morning and found the dog waiting for him behind the wheel. He thought she looked pretty good sitting there, so he started taking her into town with him just so she could get a feel for the road. They've made a few turns through the field, him sitting beside her, his foot on the accelerator, her muzzle on the wheel. Now they are practicing going up and down the lane, with him whispering encouragement in her silky ear. She is a handsome dog with long ears and a speckled muzzle, and he is a good teacher. Now my wife, Millie, he says, she was always too timid on the road, but don't you be afraid to let people know that you are there. The dog seems to be thinking about this seriously. Braking, however, is still a problem, but he is building a mouthpiece which he hopes to attach to the steering column. And when he upgrades to one of those new sports utility vehicles with the remote ignition device, he will have solved the key in the lock problem. Although he has not yet let her drive into town, he thinks she will be ready sometime next month. And when his eyes get bad and her hip dysplasia gets worse, he thinks this will come in real handy. My third book was titled What I Know About Innocence, and it also has a video poem with it. I wrote about a local murder that occurred in our neighborhood many years before I moved here. But my son, who is a fiction writer, looked at that and said, "Gee, Mom, this isn't anything like what you normally write. This is really dark. Can I film it?" And he did that, and those poems are available online if you want to see them. It's called Dark Flower, and it's many different ways of looking at the way a community remembers this particular murder. But this poem that I'm going to read is about a cat, and the cat's name was Boo. But the title of the poem is What the Black Cat Is Not. The black cat at the end of the hall resembles everything that she is not. She is the word you cannot recall, the phrase that cannot be taught. A piece of the night, nearly opaque, a paradox of forgetfulness when memory replaces heartache. She is spearmint, licorice, and anise, cardamom on the back of the tongue, a wish, a secret, the thread of doubt that lingers when daylight has clung to the bleary edge of sleep without the comfort of reason, or the tender bruise of longing we do not discuss. She is a mirror over blackened water, the plushness of midnight, a crevice, the stories you tell in a whisper, the things that you know by heart. She is everything dark and familiar, everything present that dwells apart. I think I write about animals because mostly I like the person I am when I'm with an animal. And I'm most comfortable with them. And another poem I'm going to read from this collection is called A Blessing for Unholy Things. And it also has a dog in it. October, and every morning the dog rushes out to bark at scarecrows neighbor children have staked in the yard. A sight hunter, she knows a human shape when she sees it, a raised arm, an angry gesture. I too have been tricked by things less honest. The stick that turns into a snake, the gourd that grows into the shape of a saint, the relic you keep in a little satin heart. Who is to say they are not genuine? If I lift a spider to the windowsill, carry a toad across the road, is it any more or less than prayer? Any less reverent than the blackbirds that gather each evening to mutter their own dark rosary? I want a blessing for unholy things, for the catbird that empties the sparrow's nest, for the mice, moles, and grubs that eat at the roots of the apple trees, for everything that bites and stings and spoils, a blessing in which the faithless can nevertheless put their faith. And my most recent full-length book is The Apricot and the Moon. And I will read a couple of poems from that, and if there's time, I'll talk a little bit about raising monarchs. This poem is titled For the Birds. At the farmer's market, the grocer has decided to give me a Bible lesson as I fumble for my wallet to purchase a squash. This one is called the Crown of Thorns, he says, to remind us of the cross, and here are the spokes, one for each of the commandments. I give the grocer his money, but my sympathy is with the squash, whose nature has been hijacked by religion. It fills my palm with its hefty promise, and I suspect it of knowing the true art of resurrection. Seeds packed into a sinewy cave where the pulp is so fragrant that time holds still. When I split the ovum with a knife, I reveal a space so private that I am embarrassed to have looked. Flesh as pale as the new moon, and an aroma so seminal that it stains all thought. With the sharp edge of a spoon, I scrape out the seeds, and holding the soft entrails in one hand, throw it all to the birds. And this poem is titled October in the Workshop. The butterfly that's mentioned in this poem is a black swallowtail, which overwinters in a chrysalis. It's not like the monarch, which migrates. So, at the moment, I have a few black swallowtail chrysalis waiting it out in the garage. The time will come when they will come out in spring, about the time you've forgotten about them. But the title of the poem is October. In October, we count our losses. Lost the page. I go out in the evening's chill to cut a handful of parsley and come in with a caterpillar so large and hungry that I set him in the middle of a bouquet of parsley, dill, and rue, where he continues to eat while we set the table, stir the soup. Fifth in star, so late in the year we list the things he must have survived. September storms, the starlings that strip the garden, drought, first frost, but now suddenly this abundance, more than he can consume. We talk about our losses as well, people and places that cannot be reclaimed, and how grief can become its own comfort, even in the middle of the night. By morning, he has wandered away. It will be a month before I find him, wrapped into a papery chrysalis, plain and nondescript, a little mummy, tucked on the underside of a chair, where he will wait until spring, sheltering on the porch while snow and rain pelt the aging screens. Occasionally, I think of him in his little ark and the antifreeze that he must have concocted in order to survive this winter. About the time I forget to worry if he will emerge in the spring, I find him reborn, clinging to the farthest screen, wings catching the sunlight, warming to a new day. There are so many of winter's little griefs that I might bring with me into this spring, but I open the window and let them fly away. A little success story for that fellow. I have a chapbook out that talks about raising monarch butterflies. It's called Wings, or Does the Caterpillar Dream of Flight? And like most of the things that I write about, it was one of the things that I do that I promised I wasn't going to write about. So, of course, I did. I was kind of surprised when these poems appeared. But I don't know if you know much about monarchs. They are endangered, mostly because we keep destroying the one thing that monarch caterpillars need, which is milkweed. And Roundup Ready crops have gotten rid of most of the milkweed in the Midwest. So people who want to preserve them, and especially preserve that migration from the Midwest to Mexico, monarchs are the only butterfly that migrates, are planting a lot of milkweed. Sometimes we bring them in, but mostly you plant milkweed and hope that you can sustain them in a sheltered place in the garden. And there's a lot of legacy behind monarchs, a lot of myth. This poem is titled Metamorphosis, and it mentions different instars. An instar is the phase that the caterpillar is in. A fifth instar is the largest caterpillar out there, and it will soon make a chrysalis and turn into a butterfly. So this is metamorphosis. The myths are always about resurrection or reincarnation, pure and simple, leaving one life behind and escaping into another. Butterflies etched on prison walls, butterfly tattoos, white butterflies in the tombs of the pharaohs, honoring the souls of lost children, the unborn, those sacrificed so others may live. Or your ancestors, perhaps, come back to explain that the myths are symbolic, but necessary. And yet this fellow, preparing to bury his face in a blossom so fragrant he would not choose to be anywhere else, cannot imagine a summer that is not made for him. He is born to consume the world one leaf at a time, while somewhere within his clownish body he plans for the future, wing pads thickening along his sides, antenna and proboscis, stomach merging into thorax and abdomen. It is not myth-making, but a plan so much a part of his DNA that there is no room for suffering and loss, anguish and grief, or even the convenience of myth. Soon he will slip his skin, drop the remnants of caterpillar life, and tuck into a chrysalis so tight and resolute there is no room at all for metaphor. Do I have time for one more butterfly poem?
Go for it.
Sure. This is titled The Migration. Butterflies migrate sometimes over 2,000 miles in order to roost in the Oyamel firs in Mexico. And then they will come back in the spring up through Texas. And this poem mentions the Texas funnel and how they can track monarch flocks on radar. The migration. Monarchs left over a week ago. Still, I see them everywhere, the way you see loved ones who are long gone. A leaf that suddenly comes to life, a flutter among the marigolds. How many ways are there to say they have flown before we admit they are gone? According to weather reports, the leading edge is already south of Tulsa, 500,000 strong, flying at 2,500 feet, just ahead of a cold front, winging towards the Texas funnel into Mexico. I finger a dry chrysalis, chitin thin, ghost-like in its emptiness, a relic from another life. See, this is how the escape was made. Here is the slit where the wings push through. This is how the temple is rent. This is how you merge with the air, how the earth falls away and you become one with the sky. Thank you.
Woo! Beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Cathryn, so gorgeous.
Thank you.
Just kind of like moving backwards. It's just such a fascinating thing that you raise and support the monarchs like this, and that you've observed them so closely. It's so beautiful to see these images and to imagine seeing them as you do, and also these darker poems that kind of give us this like powerful eeriness, and then such fun and such humor. You personify animals all you want, Cathryn.
Thank you. Thank you. I probably will.
Yes, those poems were just fantastic. Got my mom laughing in the chat with the what about the dog, the driving.
Oh yeah. So sweet. Yeah, we've lots of critters. I put in the chat that many critters tonight with your poems, and then we have geckos and
moths. And the moth made an appearance in one of your poems as well.
Right. That's right. The moth showed up again. Definitely, it's like Wild Kingdom tonight here on FUMFA Live.
We love it, Cathryn. Just such beautiful, such great, graceful poems of these. So much observation of the natural world around you. So much metaphor, and I think people who are sour on personification are just missing out on a whole world of exploration, poetic exploration. And I particularly love those poems where you're imagining the life of this dog, and also the philosophy class poem. How great is that? Now you're imagining all these things, including the bear.
Yeah. I think everybody personifies animals. It's just part of who you are. If you have a pet, it has a persona that lives with you. And I think the poet just didn't understand.
Yeah. Whoever said that maybe they just didn't understand.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's awesome, Cathryn. What a fantastic reading. Let's bring up Hamant for our Q&A, and let's give another round of applause for Hamant Singh and
Yeah.
Cathryn Essinger. Woo! So we want to make sure we give you applause that you can hear, since we're doing our live stream remote. We've got people on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Unfortunately, Chris and I can't see the live chat on Twitter, so we can't see their questions, but people in Facebook and YouTube, we can see your questions. So get your questions into the chat right now for Hamant, for Cathryn, for both of our special guest poets this evening. But we will get it kicked off with our famous first question, Chris Belden.
Sure. And we'll start with Hamant and move over to Cathryn. But it's very simple. How built into this question is how did you become a poet? But how has being a poet changed your life?
A huge question.
Yeah, it is.
You go first.
You just become hypersensitive to everything, really. A lot more sensitive than you were without poetry. Everything starts to, in some way or other, link itself up, I think. So you look at something and it reminds you of a memory you had, or a concept you've read about, or perhaps and a metaphor gets extended several times over. I think it's just made me a lot more aware and a lot more thoughtful, I think, and mindful of little things that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise, I reckon.
Absolutely. You're so much like in this present moment, and then you follow this chain of associations that kind of speaks to this larger truth about consciousness, about metaphor, about experience that you might not have noticed otherwise had you not been following that chain of associations and been open to that flow.
Yes, but I'm sorry, is this a chicken or the egg kind of a thing, though? Because is that something that happened when you started writing poetry, or were you always that way and that led you to write poetry?
It's wow. I was actually wondering the same about Cathryn and her butterflies. The butterflies, because raising butterflies is such a. Did you start raising butterflies and then, realize how amazingly poetic they are in the uniqueness of monarch butterflies, or did it go the other way around? I don't know, Chris. I think for me it might have started with just being observant, I guess, when I was younger, and then just this hypersensitivity of all my senses developed with the poetry, I reckon.
I think being open to being moved, and then that openness kind of just opens this Pandora's box of experience and writing and association, and it just sort of drags you in with it.
It's hard to imagine, somebody saying one day, well, now I'm going to be a poet and I'm going to start writing poetry, and then all of a sudden you make all these connections. I think it was probably from when you were just a little guy, not that you were like, oh, this is I'm going to be a poet, but at some point you were like,
I'm doing this. Like, this is happening.
More open because you already could see these things.
Right.
But what do I? Cathryn, what about
you? I've written a lot of things. I was a fiction writer before I was a poet. And it took me a long time to grow up and realize that I was actually a poet. I was suffering too much over fiction. I was looking at it too particularly.
It's 3 against 1 tonight, Chris. Chris is the fiction half of the show.
It's probably why I prefer narrative poetry, however, though I do like narrative a whole lot. I think narrative is actually where everything lies. That's what the human brain wants to do. It wants to find a narrative. But I blame becoming a poet on my children, because I was a fiction writer, but once I had kids, I couldn't concentrate long enough to finish a story. And My oldest son is a novelist, and I have no idea how he holds still that long just to write it all. And I just knew that I was more impatient than that. And poetry was something that I could carry around. I could memorize a little bit of it, kind of think about it while I'm walking the dog. And then eventually, when I got closer to paper, actually write something down. But I realize now, I mean, like 35 years later, that it's how I live my life. You know, it's how I think about things. I listen to a line and think about what that actually leads to. It's the way you figure things out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You think it's I imagine it's like a photographer who just looks around and frames things.
Right.
Yeah.
That you do it just, but more as poetry versus light and shadow and
I think that's so cool, Cathryn. And I think that's a really interesting transition. And I feel like I can hear definitely all those narrative qualities in your poems, and they really, are many of them are really telling a whole story. They do kind of keep us rooted as we are seeing the different things that they're showing us, kind of in a specific narrative. And that's so cool. And I love how both of you just spoke to, it's your way of seeing things. It's your way of capturing, what you're experiencing and what inspires you. And that really resonates. We have a question in the chat that really kind of just jumps off of what we're really kind of both of you are talking about right now, from Mary Cathryn Harper. This is a question for both of you. Cathryn and Hamant, what might it mean to you, the idea that poets are born to consume the world? What a fabulous question. Hamant, dive in.
Wow. Yeah, that's a heavy one.
Mary Cathryn.
Great question. I've never heard this quote before, but I don't know. I think the world around us is very, very transient. It's a fleeting moment that, when you really reflect on it, doesn't matter. What you can do in a lifetime, in the grand scale of things, doesn't truly matter in the whole scale of things. So to consume the world, I don't know about that. It's a very big claim. I don't know if anyone can actually consume the entire world in that short lifetime, but I think it's got to do more with what you make of the time that you have on this earth, which again is another subjective concept that we should
Yep.
But yeah, like if you live for say 60 years or 80 years, what is it you accomplish in that time? I think that's a question that's been very dear to me. And with poetry, I think I attempt to capture certain patterns, idiosyncrasies, connections that I see, or reflections, ironies in your everyday life.
Yes.
I don't know so much about consuming the world, but I certainly
in consuming these images, these myths, these moments that you have, and kind of like you were saying, like not just sort of letting them pass and kind of fall away into the infinite oblivion, but rather to capture them, like you're consuming that moment and kind of capturing it a bit. And I think you're actually doing that on, like we were saying before, on this massive scale, from like these personal moments that turn into metaphors, that turn into these poems. And and these like sort of huge reflections on these different sort of mythic moments, and how that captures some of the, like an essence of human life as well. I think we're all like taking these different kinds of moments from the world that exists around us, and consuming them, but like transforming them, crystallizing them, and like processing them in an interesting way. I love it. This is such a huge question. We're gonna need to like bring it back down to we're gonna need to bring it back down on the next question, but we need to pass this to Cathryn.
I'm hoping she's referring to a line that I read about the caterpillar who is born to consume the world one leaf at a time. It is the only thing he knows, is that I have to eat, and I have to become a chrysalis, and I have to become a butterfly. If you want to push that onto poets, I suppose they too consume what they see. All we know is what we know, and we just have to keep pushing that little limit to see what it might become. And we're in the process too of becoming something else.
Right.
Everyone's in the process of becoming something else. And how do you do that unless you consume what's around you and try to find out? You don't ask a caterpillar to tell me what you're thinking about. He just knows that that's what he's supposed to do. His invert, his world as he sees it, is that this world was made for him. And as far as I'm concerned, this world was made for poets too.
Yeah, it was.
We'll just consume it one leaf at a time.
I love that. I really, really love that, Cathryn. And I think you just solved a little bit of the mystery of this question right there.
I hope so.
I love that. I love that. And Mary Cathryn Harper, thank you so much for this awesome question. Super, super deep. But let's come back to sort of some more, kind of everyday details of what we're doing with these manuscripts. Hamant, this is your debut manuscript. How did you get to this point? How long have you been collecting and editing these poems? And how did your book take the shape that it's in now?
I never wanted to publish, to be honest. I just wrote and I just wrote and wrote and wrote, and I still have some of these poems scribbled on bits of paper back in Singapore, and I just collected what I had one day, and I'm like, why not try and make something bigger out of this? And so I tried to conceptualize a work of 3 sections, and again, this is like my debut, so I think a lot of it is very raw. It's very raw. It's very unfiltered. It's just things that I put together and arranged in like as neatly as I can and as neatly as I could into 3 sections, and then finally like I decided to reach out, and then it got published. Which is great, which is a lot of fun. I'm currently working on another book with a Mexican writer. He's a prose writer.
Awesome.
And it's going to be a mix of English poetry and Spanish prose about inebriation.
Yes! We support this!
So I've just begun to start writing. He's just started writing as well. So there's poems about alcohol abuse, being drunk, drugs.
Okay, we like drinking, but
not pleasant things, but a good variety, because we've just taken the word and kind of just like thrown it open.
No, this is powerful stuff.
And I'm also going to start writing a book about my grandfather, so that would not be poetry, moving away from poetry, but that's going to be kind of like letters. It's going to be structured like letters to my grandfather. I've never met my grandfather, So
Awesome, Hamant. This is
yeah,
awesome. You're speaking
seasoned the
so
work.
humbly about a really carefully put together collection that really works in its 3 sections. I have read it, people.
Thank you.
I've reviewed it as well.
Thank you.
You put it together so carefully, and actually, you would never know that this was your first time like reading from your book live. It sounds like you've been reading these poems forever. Just a really powerful reading voice. You're really kind of capturing so many awesome images. I think there is an intensity to the emotion, and I feel a rawness there, but certainly not a rawness in the work itself. It feels very careful. It feels very complete. Even when you're talking about the end of the world, it's somehow so graceful, and I see your careful work in that. And you are getting into it. You're working on two next books. So we're so excited for you. You know, as soon as you've got some manuscripts going, like come right back. We want to hear from those as well.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really wanted to ask you, Cathryn, what is typically your process with your manuscript? You have several books out there. Have you taken different processes with different manuscripts, or do you tend to work in a similar way? How does that work for you?
Oh my, I have absolutely no idea. It's just a mystery what happens. And I'll have to disagree with her. I thought his poems sounded very polished. I didn't hear anything that seemed raw about them at all. Obviously, he's been rewriting in his head a long time. I was very lucky that I met a group of writers that who had similar intents that I did. And in rural Ohio, that is really, really unusual. And because it was so unusual, we remained friends. And we published in journals and things of the sort the way you were supposed to. And then it finally hit me, oh, maybe this is a book.
Yes.
And the only book that I wrote intentionally, beginning to end, is the one about raising monarchs. The others were just an accumulation of poems, and that happened to fit together. And occasionally our group kind of challenges each other to do something. I told them one afternoon, I said, I think I could write a poem every month about dogs. And they said, well, why don't you do that? And so I wrote 2 poems every month, and I only brought them the one that was about dogs until we finally had a collection together, and they have been invaluable. I wouldn't have any books in print at all without them. I don't put anything out. I don't submit anything without them looking at it first. Even if they make no changes, it's just my confidence level is not there unless the best readers I know have seen it, and they have been just invaluable. They're the Greenville Poets, and they have a website if you're interested in that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So find friends. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
We talk so much about community on here. Our guests talk so much about community. Chris and I, how did we become like best friends? Well, we went to Fairfield University MFA, and we were like the 2 people who brought guitars, and we ended up just jamming out, organizing all the talent shows. And then, we've just been great friends ever since. And we are, 117 streams deep. Getting to know people across the country, across the globe, and also highlighting people from from our MFA program, both people that we studied with, people who came after us, and we love hearing from people from our program, and also people in writers groups, like just how much it means to have that community, because writing is such a solitary thing. And maybe you're not always in community, but you think of that time where you did have a writers group, or where you did work with a mentor, or when you're going to be reaching out about a manuscript, you have those people who make all the difference in terms of that encouragement. And so you know what, Hamant, you have a lot extra. Hopefully you're going to get many more connections as you start sharing your book. I know you have I'm sure you do still have plenty, but we're here for you. We're part of your like extended community as well.
That's nice.
To get out there. But we love that, Cathryn. That is just so great. Chris,
Yeah.
I really want to ask about these fabulous images that we have of animals for both of you. How Hamant, the gecko story, like it happened, you wrote that poem in like a day, which you said never happens, and we can all agree as poets, like that's a gift poem, like it comes straight from the muse. It's a miracle. But how how long does it typically take you to write to write and edit a particular poem, if you can sort of estimate from like that one day gecko poem experience to
that gecko poem was actually I wrote it in something like half an hour. I came back to my room, I just wrote it, and I didn't change anything.
Traumatized.
It definitely was trauma, because it was possession, like I no one writes like that. No one writes like that. But typically it takes a couple of days, because what I like to do is I begin, I have a concept in my head and some images, and then I start building on it, and it'll take like a couple of days, 3 days. Sometimes I get stuck and I go, I'm shelving this, I'm just going to start on a new one, and then I come back to it when I when I feel a bit more unstuck, a bit more creative. But sometimes it takes weeks, because it might be finished. Like I've got a couple of finished poems right now, but I just come back and look. I like coming back to it after like 3 days or so, just to read it again.
Yeah.
And you think it's finished, but it never truly is finished, is it?
Yeah.
But it's the curse of writing, I suppose, or creation, really. But yeah, like typically it would take 3-4 days until like I'm finished. Typically, otherwise sometimes it can go up to like a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's actually great. I mean, for my personal process, sometimes it is a pretty quick one, especially if I have like a pressure, a little bit of a deadline, I want to submit to something. But sometimes mine are like marinating or sitting on the shelf, like waiting for me to have the freshest of eyes for like months, even years. Wow. So that's still a pretty quick process, but that's so good too, because you're, it's still like really emotion. Mine like definitely go dormant. I have kind of a very slow process, but that's so cool. I love to hear about the way that people are working. What about you, Cathryn? What is the typical poem speed? How does it happen? Poem by
I don't know. I just hope to get lucky.
I get it.
I have a journal that I kept for many, many years, and I do go back and look at it occasionally. And I know someone asked me one time, how long did it take you to write that poem? Well, I actually know the poem. I cut a clipping out of a newspaper about a Houston housewife who found a 6-foot-long snake in her toaster.
No!
I thought at the time, I really need to talk to this woman. I need to talk to her about what church she goes to, what kind of bread she uses, all this stuff. And I cut it out and set it aside, but I never got any farther with it. And then one time, years later, I flipped through that notebook and I thought, oh, I know what to do with this now. And I think I had to grow up to it or something. But my writers group meets once a month, and one of our rules is you bring something.
Yes.
Even if it's just a mess, you bring something.
That's right.
And so that's kind of nagging you. And I always feel comfy if I know I have a couple of ideas I can fall back on for this month. So I usually have something just kind of stewing.
I really feel very, very at home with our two poetry guests this evening, Chris, because I really understand that poems take the time that they take. It could be a gift poem in a day, a few days, a few weeks, a few months. Sometimes they're really marinating over several years. And somehow, after about a year or 2 or 3, you have a book-length manuscript, and it really just fits together. And there's a lot of trust and faith in that process, even though, of course, there are factors that help push you along, like you were saying, Cathryn. The book group meetings. But I feel like this would drive some of our prose people crazy, because they'd be like, if I just relied on, like, when it came to me, like, the book would never get written. But you know what? We have a different way, and we understand each other, right? Chris, do you understand what we're even saying over here?
I don't think it's all that different. I think.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, with fiction, I mean, there's plenty of ideas that just sit there for a long time until you feel like you're ready.
Okay.
Or I mean, you might write a 300-page book, but then you go back and look at it, and it's like, you change it completely because because you've moved along, and it's like, well, that's not going to work. And also, you write songs, I write songs.
True.
Very similar. It's right. You have like little pieces of something, and it can be years,
That's right. Until it's fully formed, and you just trust that process. You're just patient with it, and you're pursuing it at the same time, but you're not pushing it. And there's a real interesting tension with poetry. Like you want to make sure you make time for it, and you make time for editing. But if you push a poem too much, you can really bruise it. So I think that's creative work sometimes just takes the time that it takes.
And at the same time, if you have that deadline and you have to push it, and maybe it's a mess, but maybe you somehow, I don't know, you find
a way to make it happen.
find some kind of magic because you had to. It's just like, well, it's Tuesday night. It's the writers group night. I got to do something, and
it's like, and that by itself is a spark that gets it going. I love it, and I love that we all like understand exactly what we're talking about in here. That's so great. You know what? It is time for our famous last double question, Chris Belden.
All right. All right. So again, we'll start with Hamant. We always like to end with a pearl of wisdom. So, speaking to the writers out there, any kind of pearl of wisdom, something you've learned about the writing process that you want to share that will help people. And part 2 is a book recommendation. Anything that floats your boat that you want people to read.
Pearl of wisdom, as much wisdom as I can offer at my early stage. Just do it, man. Just do it.
Yes.
If it's good, it's good. If it's not, shelve it. Just do it, because really with anything in life, just do it. And I know so many people who just talk about writing. Oh, I'm gonna write this book. I'm gonna this. I'm gonna that. 15 years later, nothing.
Yep.
Kind of like the writers clubs that you mentioned. Just bring something along and just work on it. It's always going to be a work in progress until you decide to send it off to the publishers. So just do it.
That's right. That's excellent advice.
Favorite book. Well, my favorite all-time favorite book. It's a little short book. It's called Hunger by Nat Hamsun. I think he's a Norwegian writer.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's a Norwegian writer. Hunger, lovely book, hilarious, very short. You can do it in a day. Hunger, definitely.
Nice.
That's my all-time favorite.
Thanks so much, Hamant. And we didn't get to ask you about all of these different myths and religious references, in your collection. But we'll just have to have you back one day and ask you those questions at that point. Or people can follow you and ask you directly, on social media.
Yep.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Cathryn, pearl of wisdom.
I don't think I have pearls of wisdom. All I can say is
I don't believe.
Try to be happy.
Try to be happy.
Live your life. Try to be happy. Read everything you can get your hands on, and know that what you're doing is worthwhile. Even if you never publish it or never get it out there, the act of doing it is much more important than you think it is. Just being an artist in the world is really important. It makes its own little stake in the world. Yeah, and just have faith in what you're doing. It's probably better than you think it is. Most writers are so critical of themselves that they don't see the strengths in a piece. And if you don't like something, see if you can grow up to it. You know, sometimes you write ahead of yourself, not realizing where you're going, and then the path kind of clears and you say, oh, that's what I had in mind.
Those are several excellent pearls, Cathryn.
Yeah.
I'm just taking notes over here.
A book that I go back to again and again, or an author I go back to again and again, is Tony Hoagland. And I love his pallbearers envying the one who rides. And just his sense of humor and that kind of macabre look at the world. And the way he can just incorporate just going to the grocery store, you know, into a poem. All of those things. And I just recently read Victoria Chang's Obit, which just form-wise is really intriguing. It's just really intriguing.
Yeah, we've had that one recommended before. Yeah, that's
Did I like it? I'm not quite sure I liked it because there are too many losses in my family to read a book titled Obit. And yet the form of it was so fascinating. One prose poem after another, and a poem in the middle of the book that was, as far as I'm concerned, it was incomprehensible. I couldn't read it. I could read the beginning and the end, but I didn't really understand it. And then I finally decided that I needed to be nicer to myself and just skip that. And I did. And I think that's perfectly legitimate. You know, I'm sorry if a poet doesn't fit into what you're needing at the moment. You can turn the page.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Life is too short.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is so cool. Such excellent pearls and great recommendations from you, Cathryn. Also, thank you so much to both of our guests this evening, Hamant Singh and Cathryn Essinger. One more round of applause.
I'll follow your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to our audience on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and people who will be watching later as well. It's been such a fantastic evening. Just such a pleasure to get to hear from both of you and, and get to know both of you better. We always have a great time, and it was so nice to have both of you here this evening. Next week, we will not be online because we will be in person at Eco-Evolution.
That's right. We'll be there on Friday, the 20th at 7:00.
7.
Luke Molina, Liz Reichland, both of them singer-songwriters, and Suzanne Frischkorn, a poet. That's at Eco-Evolution in South Norwalk. For anybody in the area, come in, drive in from Ohio, fly in from Mexico.
I will.
Whatever you need to do.
Make it happen. Well, and on that book tour, if you're coming to the Northeast and that lines up with our in-person Hamant, we're going to make that happen. We'll
sounds good. Yeah.
We'll be in conversation. And Cathryn, the next time you visit Connecticut, you got to let us know.
I'll try.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. See you.
Good night.